Thank you for joining, especially the ones who joined for the memes and have to stay now. This is a gentle introduction to a tool called Gitpod that I really like, and I promised an iPad-driven demo, but I'm going to run on a Mac, so just forget about it. You'll see why before the end. Really quickly, my name is Julien. If you want to talk about Kotlin or gardening, you can see me, or Gitpod as well. So first of all, how many of you know what Gitpod is in the room? A few, okay. The ones I've already convinced. So what's Gitpod anyway? If you look at the website, that's what they say. Spin up fresh, automated dev environments for each task in the cloud in seconds. If I read this, that's what I look like. I don't know. You probably worked at big companies as well, where you have like a 3000 MacBook, and then someone tells you, okay, the first thing you have to do is install a VM, right? And then you can't use all of your cores anymore, or even worse, you have to VNC into this Linux server that we're maintaining, because otherwise you can't install your tools. So when I hear cloud development environments, that's it. Until I discovered Gitpod about 3 months ago, and I went from sick to something like this. And I hope you will be as well in about 15 minutes. I forgot to start my timer, so you will have to tell me when the time is done. And if I don't convince you, I still have stickers. So, right. So let's see why. It's going to be fun because this is all in cloud, and I totally depend on the demo gods and internet. So this is a random GitHub repo, right? You found a GitHub repo. It sounds interesting for your use case. You look at it, and then what you do is, you start looking at the README. You're like, okay, details. Okay, that looks like something I want. It's using Spring Boot, very nice. I have to clone, and then I have to set up a whole lot of things, and then Maven install and Gradle boot run. Right? That's my typical day as a developer. Well, unless you have Gitpod, and then we're gonna have to wait a minute, which is basically gonna do all that for you. And hopefully, if you pray with me, in about 30 seconds, we'll have something. So this is very useful for a bunch of different people. Let us hope it works, because otherwise we go for lunch. But so, for example, if you come in as a new user, like it's the first time you see this repo. Another example is like me. You have 20 side projects a week, and then you forget about it, and you come back to it 2 years later, and then there's like 4 new Java versions, and there's like new Maven version, and maybe Elasticsearch cluster that has to be updated, and then it takes you 2 hours to set it up again. Well, if you have a tool like Gitpod and an internet connection, then you end up with something like this, right? With one click of a button, it's basically doing all the work for you, and that's. I hope all of you recognize VS Code. Right, so what it's doing is pulling all the stuff for me, it's building, right, and hopefully it's going to run it as well. Exactly, I have my demo running. If you have a better internet connection, it comes way faster. And then, I can start trying my demo, right? That's basically the root value of Gitpod. There's a few interesting things that we can see here. First of all, this link is shareable, right? So, if you have an identical memory, you can go there. And then you will be able to see my demo, right? So what that means is if I go here and I start changing stuff, right? Maybe, do we have time? Yeah, 2 minutes, we have the time. So I can go into main and then resources and then look at my templates, index, and then, for example, and comment this. There you go. Oh, I made it. I made a boo-boo. Let's see. It doesn't want to. That's fine. Let's comment one more. There you go. And then if I restart my server, Gradle, boot run, start again, then basically, imagine you're with a customer in a room, and then you can just show him your change is live, right? And hop, we have one less payment method. It's pretty nice. One other thing is you have a lot of things out of the box. So for example, you have Maven. I hope you see. If you don't see, you have to trust me. There's Maven. You have access to Java, of course. There's a whole lot of things. You have, for example, SDK man. For all of you that know SDK man, so if I want to install Kotlin, it's like 1 command away, right? So all of this is available for you for free within seconds. Now, one more thing, who sounds very oblivious, but this is basically a VM in the cloud, right? You have to see it as an AWS instance somewhere. So one thing that a lot of corporate environments don't have, for example, is the availability of reverse proxy. So if you depend on data coming in your application, and you have to use something like ngrok, for example, if I start Googling an ngrok at Alien, someone from security will say, hello, who are you? If I use something like Gitpod, then I don't have that problem anymore because everything is available from scratch on the internet, right? So I don't have to use ngrok, and I make my users happy. And one last thing that I want to say is, okay, of course, that's nice, but in the browser, it really sucks, so I don't want to work in my browser. Well, hear me out. And again, let's cross fingers. You can actually run that on your, let us all together hope for the best. You can actually run that on your local installation of VS Code. And when I mean local, I really mean local as in I have my extensions installed, I have my icon set, I have my theme that's there, because I like my beautiful icons and my dark theme, of course. So this is all basically running in an SSH remote connection. It takes a little more time than I would want. But yeah, that's basically, you can actually run locally, and let's give it a few more seconds and then stop. Projects are imported. Let's see if it's already imported or not. Not yet. But when it's done, it's also setting up reverse connections or reverse port forwarding, so you actually can access local 8080 and have access to demo, maybe. Let's pretend it does. Right, so that's about it for the default. Now, what do you need to actually run Gitpod? Well, this is a Sprint Pet Clinic. Does anyone not know the Pet Clinic? You don't know the Pet Clinic, all right. The Pet Clinic is, it's getting very old now, but it was like it's like the to-do app for, it's to-do MVC for the JavaScript frameworks. So it's basically a demo Spring Boot app, and then you can do, the Kotlin version, etc. So it's basically just some kind of REST API thing. Well, I have cloned that. I want to, let my users easily in, so I'm going to run Gitpod on it. What I've done here is that I've just, the easiest way, and you can try that today, is to actually prepend everything with Gitpod. So you take your GitHub URL, or your Bitbucket URL for that matters, or GitLab, put gitpod.io, I forgot the IO, /hash, and then you press enter, and you end up in a Gitpod environment. And they're nice enough to actually generate a Gitpod YAML file for you, right? So you just have to get started now. Do you see? Good enough? Can at least one person answer? Thank you. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to set this thing up just like a second ago. So what I want is basically that it builds. I want it to run. I want it to open a preview on the browser, and even install instances for me. So I'm going to do commands, and I'm going to say, OK, it's a Gradle application, so I'm going to add Gradle boot run. And the difference between init and comment, it doesn't show today, but if we were in a workshop, for example, init is you have to see this as Docker layers. So the first time someone does this thing called pre-builds with Gitpod. So if I'm the first one using this thing, it's going to create a pre-build, right? But if a second person comes and then uses the same repo within a certain span of hours, then you can just reuse the pre-build, which means you only have to do command on your own instance. And what that means is the first person has to pay the price, but everybody else can get to work very fast. Now, what do we want to do? Yes, we said we want to have some ports, so I'm going to set up 8080 and set visibility to public. And then I'm going to say on open, I want to open a preview, right? So that's basically exactly the same setup that I had a few minutes ago. And one more thing, which is nice, because you know better, it's your repo. So what you want to do is you want to propose your users to use certain extensions, right, for VS Code, because it's going to make their life better, and let's use maybe the Java Red Hat extension. And this is exactly the setup we had a few minutes ago to have a demo running in a minute. And if I had good internet, I would restart it again, and you will see that I had exactly the same thing. Just to show you what the pet clinic looks like. How much time do I have left? About 5 minutes? Yeah. OK. That's how the pet clinic looks like, right? OK. Let's see. What did I forget? Yes. You will tell me, that's great, but my application uses a database, right? I'm in 2022. You can do Docker files. You can use your own Docker file, or I want to use my own SDK that we're building at home. How do I see the row? I want the row file. Well, let's work it like this. There's two things you can do. You can set up a specific Docker file by specifying the image here, and then you just have to specify your Docker file yourself. So it can be that. In this case, for example, I'm just installing, in this case, a specific Java version. I want the 11 from Amazon for whatever reason. That also works for Docker Compose. So if you want to run an Elastic cluster with a PostgreSQL database and all of that stuff, you can also just set up a Docker Compose, and then in your command, say, what's the command? Docker up? Docker, to basically start your Docker Compose cluster. One last thing that I want to show is typical use case for me, at least during my day, is I work on a repo, and then someone comes and says, hey, can you have a look at this, that pull request? And also, oh, but as I'm working, I see a typo somewhere, right? And every time I have to git stash and then change my branch, fix my typo, create an issue, right? I think that's probably something that most of you have seen at least once. Same if I want to see a pull request, I have to go into there. There is this thing, this extension, this Chrome extension or Firefox extension for Gitpod, which means that if I have an issue here, for example, and I can click on the button, and it's going to set up a Gitpod instance for me for that specific branch, or pull request, or whatever I'm doing, which is very nice because, well, if you're able to, I mean, I'm very mono-threaded personally, but you could actually have 4 different instances running at the same time with different branches, so you can actually fix a typo without having to switch context at any point in time. And what I really, really like with the Gitpod, it's a company, is that they really think about DevX. So in that case, for example, without just creating a GitHub issue, they actually create an issue, a branch for me. So they set me up in a separate branch. So I can just start working, push it, and then it will be attached to the issue. Yeah, what else do we have? Yes, workspaces. Everything I've shown, and all of the preparation I've done for the last 14 days have been saved in my own local environment. So at any point in time, I can actually come back to, yeah, I had some fun with Prometheus. I can actually spin it up again if I want to, right? And one nice thing they do as well is they actually show you the changes. So if I started working and then stopped at something, for example, this is something where I have some changes running, I can actually do what I've done, see what I've done. And even actually download the code or share it if I want, right? So if I start preparing something, you can even imagine some kind of thing where you're preparing a pull request and just share an instance with someone, a colleague, for example. And yeah, and the last thing we're going to run before, this is actually supporting IntelliJ IDE, because I'm sure that most of you use IntelliJ. And it's also supporting this thing called .files. So you can give them a repository. So let's save that, and then again, once more, pray for the gods of demos as I'm going through my last slides. Open in Gitpod, new workspace, limit reach. I have to close some because I've been preparing too much. That's okay. I'm gonna delete a couple and then do the pet clinic instead. All right, new workspace. Yes. That will run with IntelliJ Gateway, so you need the ultimate extension for it, but it works. Okay, let's wait for it to run, and in the meantime, let's go back to what Gitpod isn't. Because I see a lot of people using that in a bit of a weird way, and maybe it's a little confusing because it's probably a new use case to a certain extent. Gitpod isn't some kind of deployment platform. It's not Heroku. So yeah, it's very nice, but within 30 minutes, if you're inactive, it's going to stop. So it's not meant to run your application. And it is not, oh, it's working, nice. It's not a shared dev environment. So you can't just combine 6 people working at the same time on it. What it's perfect for is, as I said, developer experience for new users. If you're running a library, if you have a side project, you can get them working. Like if you have a game, for example, you can set up the game for them in just one click away. If you work with many setups, if you have like Python 2, Python 3 applications, and maybe also some Ruby, some Go, all of that you will set up statically in your Docker file, and you're good. And live demos, I find that a little, you find a word for me, ironical, thank you. But if you have, if you are at the customer and he's giving you some information as to how he wants things to look like, you can actually deploy it real live. And then I know it's used a lot for us by some implementation managers that are at the customer, and he's like, yeah, but I want that to look more like this. And he's like, okay, do you want this? And then real time giving updates is pretty nice. And as I said, the pre-builds are extremely useful for workshops. Typically, at a workshop like today, for example, the bandwidth is limited. So the first thing that the trainer does is, okay, you want a workshop, download this 1 gigabyte Red Hat image, for example, and then we're going to start working. And then 30 people download 1 gigabyte image, and 45 minutes later, there's no coffee anymore, and it can start. This is AWS in the cloud, so nobody has to download a gigabyte image locally, right? Because we're all spinning up in the cloud, and because of pre-builds, you can reuse. And I'm keeping that for last. This is free for everyone, including private repos up to 50 hours. And it's like GitLab, they will stay free forever. And then they have like a business and enterprise setup. Thank you, you can go. You may go to lunch now. And